Anger, curiosity, and tenacity. These are the building blocks of a type of journalism that not only reflects society to itself, but can change it for the better. I'm Tom Andronis, and this is the story behind the story, the podcast where we unpack powerful stories, how they're made, how they move the needle, and how the story behind them differs from what plays out in public. Today's episode is personal for me because I'm sitting down with someone I've known for nearly 2 decades. Journalist, broadcaster, author, and master storyteller, Justin Smith. If you've ever listened to the radio or read the newspaper and wondered how a story doesn't just get told, but actually creates change, then this chat is for you. Justin takes us inside what he calls campaign journalism, the art of identifying something that's not right, building a story around the real people at its centre, and refusing to let it go until the wrong is righted. This is the story behind the story. G'day, Justin.
Tommy, thank you. Pleasure.
Thanks for joining us. Would you believe it's been almost 20 years since we met?
What a kid you were. You didn't have any of this. You still barely knew how to use a razor, I think. But
yeah,
no, I can't believe it, to be honest. It just flies by.
It's been a very long time.
Yeah.
I have very clear memories of
Tell me.
the early days after we met. I remember 3AW Studios in Bank Street.
Yep.
I remember turning up bleary-eyed and wildly underdressed for a professional environment. I remember sitting next to you in the back of the control booth. You were on my right.
Right.
I think Luca Ganano might have been on the left.
Yep.
Selby Nicholas in the other room.
Yes, yeah.
And, of course, Neil Mitchell sitting behind the glass in the
Yep.
studio doing Neil Mitchell things. And I think my sort of pervading memory from that time is just the working relationship between you and Neil and the rest of the team. Like, it was just sort of, it seemed to me as a very new person in that environment, almost like clockwork, you know, and it was such a high intensity, high pressure, high perfectionism kind of environment, but at the same time, so many kind of loose cogs and
Yep.
wheels and things
Yeah.
sort of flying everywhere.
And sort of jokes and just flying by the seat of your pants a little bit too, because I think probably some people would be a little bit shocked at how much you know what you want to do,
Yeah.
you know the things that you want to cover and the stories that you want to do, but you don't really have it all mapped out to the final minute. You know, you would
Yeah.
think that any show like that, you've got to, it's planned to the second. If you go over 1 minute, it's all screwed up or whatever. This is not true. You know, you're sort of doing it, you're putting it together as you go, grabbing on, and you got, I had good help around me, so you're grabbing this person, say, hey, get me that and get me, can you find this person or whatever? And then you just sort of funneling through into the studio.
Yeah, and that's kind of the art and the craft of storytelling in that medium,
Yep.
right? Like,
Yep.
that was at the time and for a long time afterwards one of the most successful radio programs that Australia's ever seen, right? And obviously you're a big part of that. I remember the hunger for the story.
Yes.
Like in those production meetings before we'd go on air, it'd be like, right, what are we doing today?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I mean, it's such a beautiful place to start, though. It's just, what's the story? What are we trying? What do we want to tell? We want to tell these stories. We're not really particularly interested in those stories because they don't really mean anything to anybody. But we want to tell these stories, and having that, I guess there's a bit of instinct in there. But I like that you use the word craft because I think that's what it is too. You have some skills, or even, dare I say, some gifts. So you have a bit of a gift for news or whatever. And I think, there's plenty of people that do. You've got to keep working that craft. Well, how are you going to tell that story? How are you going to, you like this, but what are you going to do about it? Who are we going to go and get? How's the best person to tell it? And that's something I think I'm particularly proud of is that you get the story, but so who's the best person to help us tell that story? And
to progress it forward.
Yeah, and you've got someone like Neil Mitchell who can set the pitch up and say, this is a problem, or this is a good story, a fun story, or whatever. But who's that person that you go and get? And we used to try and gravitate. It's something that really I learned from that was gravitate to the real person. The person who's really affected by this story. In a lot of ways, the perfect story is the person who's affected by it, and then the person who's going to be able to fix it or has a say over it. So, you're talking to those two people. And I hate it when there's sort of lazy storytelling of going to get some some academic, and a story that is all about human beings getting screwed over or even just something good. And then somebody runs and goes, oh, yes, this guy's a professor. Oh, shit, really?
But sometimes the professor can be the stepping stone
Yes.
to the real person. And I love that as well. And one of my, I think, most kind of impactful memories from that time was when you decided you wanted that person was your unwillingness to take no for an answer, and I remember on more than one occasion the punishment that the phone took when someone on the other end of it wasn't, playing ball. But that's all part of that kind of tenacity and unwillingness to kind of say, you know what, okay, yeah, you've shut us down. We're going to go away and do something else.
Yeah. And look, and I mean, taking no for an answer, it really depends on who you're dealing with too. Like if it's somebody who should be saying yes, but they're saying no because, I don't know, whether it's even out of laziness or whatever, but they're saying no for the wrong reason. They need to be, guided towards the light a little bit. But then again, if I'm dealing with a victim of crime, particularly a victim of crime or a family, they've lost a family member in awful circumstances, there's a lot of listening that's involved in that. And then when they tell you no, you accept it.
Well,
And so that's a different kind of...
It's a contextual no.
It's a contextual no. That's right. You're a respectful no where you just say, hey, you've sat there, you've told them that what you want to do with the story. They've told you no, and they get a pass. As far as I'm concerned.
So you have many, many strings to your bow. Obviously, we've touched on your role as a senior or executive producer in the Neil Mitchell program for a long time on 3AW Radio. You've since gone on to produce and present radio programs in both Melbourne and Sydney. Anywhere else?
No, Melbourne and Sydney, that's enough.
Sydney. You're now writing for the Herald Sun, both what we might call stories and columns.
Yep.
Subtle difference.
Yeah.
You're presenting on ABC Radio Melbourne. You're the Master of Ceremonies for the Anzac Day service every year here at the Shrine of Remembrance in Melbourne. We do bits and pieces together with storylines and podcasts and some other things. And you've also written 3 very successful fiction books. What is the thing that ties all of those things together for you?
Just the story, just the love of the story, I think, honestly. And just, and I think it's people. Andrew Rule, who's a great mentor of mine, I guess known as a crime writer, but somebody said to Andrew, oh, you're good at writing crime. And he goes, no, I'm writing people. They happen to be involved in crime because it's kind of like there are a lot of great stories in crime. But he's writing people. I sort of feel a little bit the same way, is that you're talking to people and you're covering humanity. You're never going to run out of stories, are you? And you and I went to Afghanistan together and did radio programs there. I think I described it to you at the time that's like story Christmas. You wake up every morning and you don't know which one to open first. Yeah. Because there's a kid who was born in a small town of 2,000 people, and now he's in Afghanistan, fighting. And then you've got other people that it's just story Christmas. Story Christmas.
What am I getting today?
And so just that's what ties it together. I think. So whether you're writing a novel, for me, when I'm writing a novel, I tend to write it as though it's real. As though there's something I actually noticed is when I'm writing a novel, the notes that I take, for a chapter, look exactly the same as the notes I take for a story. So it's as though I've sort of told myself this story and I've made it real, and now I sort of write it. So that's kind of,
So there are 1,000 things that we could talk about today, but there's sort of one thing that I want to zero in on. And
sure.
I think probably since I met you and throughout my career, I've kind of developed a thing that I call producer brain. And to me, that means that usually whether it's a story or a creative challenge or a business problem or anything really, I can kind of see the pathway through it, and maybe it's in a way that other people can't. Now, I sense that you maybe have a similar kind of capability, but yours seems to be, to me, at another kind of level, and it's something that I've observed and admired over a long period of time, and that is to spot something that's not right, that needs fixing, and then find a way to fix it. And that obviously calls for curiosity, critical thinking, creativity, tenacity, persistence, all of these sorts of things. And and I don't know what you call it, I'll probably ask you in a second, but I sort of look at it almost like campaign storytelling, like you've set out to, there's a goal in mind, right? And we're going to go and achieve that. And I didn't bring you in here today to just blow smoke up your ass. I'd like to kind of work through.
No, really?
I want to pick this apart and explore it and sort of see how you do it, because it's not an insight I think that a lot of people get a lot of the time. Do you have a name for this?
Yeah, I do. And you've actually said it. It's not a name I say out loud. You know, it's not a name I'd put on a business card, but it's campaign journalism,
right?
And that's just how I think of it. It's campaigning, because what you're trying to do is get an outcome. You know, I probably got a lot of this off Neil. No, I didn't. I did get a lot of off Neil.
Yeah.
You know, there's
no doubt about it.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Is that you're not just saying, and you know, it's that blank storytelling of saying, oh, this thing has happened, this terrible thing has happened, and you just, there's the story, this terrible thing happened. Oh, okay, well, that's no good. Shit, you know.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I unapologetically sort of try to have an outcome for it. You know, what's the story? So it's a good story to start with. You know, it satisfies the news. It's a good story, but what's the what are we trying to achieve?
Yeah, there's an objective behind it.
Yeah. So it's campaign journalism.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And is this something that we'll dive into a couple of case studies in a moment to kind of explain to people what it is that we're talking about. But is this something you mentioned that you probably learned it a little bit from Neil and probably from others that you've worked with along the way? Like, how does this skill set develop?
Oh, yeah, I think it's first of all, you have some successes, I think, even small ones where you go and get a story. And I got this with Neil early on, is you get a story and you win. You know, but you're winning for that person, you know, and with Talkback Radio, which is beautiful, as it sort of plays out in front of people, you know. Stories in the paper are great, and TV is great, a great medium too. But the Talkback Radio, it unfolds. You know, you have the person on with their problem. You have the person who's going to solve it. You have talkback callers come in and say, yeah, it's bloody outrageous, you know, or I used to work in that area. He's right. That shouldn't be happening, or something, you know. And so the story's unfolding and everyone's a part of telling it, you know. So, you know, I think Stephen King sort of talks about in his writing process, it's like a campfire. Everyone comes and adds a stick to it, you know, and it builds up the fire, you know. The Talkback Radio is a bit like that. I hope that's answering the question. I think that's, you know, for me, that's the early successes. Have one that works and you go, this is great. You can actually change things. You can use the power of, you know, I was very lucky on that show. The Herald Sun has been incredibly good to me, you know, where I'll contact the editor and say, listen, I'm really pissed off about this and this guy's been shafted, you know, I'd really, just great, let's go, you know. And then you're just not telling the story. You're getting something out of it.
Oh, I can obviously relate to the idea of the story unfolding and you discover a new thing and you publish that and you go with that and the story develops across whether it's one program or even multiple days or weeks and those stories are incredible. But then I think taking that to another level and identifying something that needs to be resolved. Like this, something needs to change here, right?
Yes.
Like, you know, even if it's, I remember years and years ago, there was that issue about the, you know, the Wellington Road speed cameras, you know, that thousands of people were saying, I was not doing over 100 kilometres an hour and yet I've been billed at 106, you know, like identifying that story, letting that story play out is sort of one thing, but then understanding the pathway or the moves that you need to make in order to actually get that problem fixed, like that's a whole new level. So you've done this probably countless times in your career, but there are sort of a few recent ones that maybe we can dive into a little bit. So Jack Aston. Right? Jack Aston, 6 people were seriously injured when Jack drove a bus into the Montague Street Bridge in South Melbourne. That was back in February 2016. A couple of years later, jury found him guilty of 6 charges of negligently causing serious injury, and he was jailed for 5 years and 3 months with a non-parole period of 2.5 years. But that didn't sit right with you.
No, I just thought it was absolutely outrageous. And I mean, you were talking about before, as we get into that, curiosity and all the other things that happen. Probably for me first, the very first thing I feel is anger, where I think, hang on, what? What they're doing? They're locking this guy up for 5 years for hitting the Montague Street Bridge. Anyone in Melbourne listening or watching this will know that, the Montague Street Bridge gets hit hundreds of times a year. It's
notorious.
The thing's a goddamn hazard,
Yeah.
right, that hasn't been fixed, okay? And yes, Jack did the wrong thing, like he hit it, and he shouldn't have hit it, but lots of people have. But the thought of putting him in jail for that, and I had sources inside the police telling me this is bullshit, that this is happening to him. This is just, he was what the police call a clean skin.
Right.
As in, good guy, who's been caught up in something that he probably shouldn't be caught up in. No drugs. I could go on about this case for hours, but no drugs, no alcohol, no intent, no criminal record, an accident, a crash, that certainly shouldn't have happened. And there were plenty of other ways to punish him with fines and taking his license away. But the idea, and at that time, it's a few years ago, not that many years ago, probably about 4 years ago. 6 years ago.
2018, I think.
2018. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, time does go by.
Yeah, it does.
But 2018. At that time, we're letting pedophiles out of jail. We are letting really bad people get incredibly soft sentences. And then we grab this bus driver and we're going to, from Ballarat, and we're going to lock him up for 5 years. So, and the other thing about it is, for me, I don't want this to sound like bragging in any way, shape or form, but no one else was touching it. It was just it was just reported as a story. But
so this is the difference, though. That's what we're talking about. You can let the story play out and report the story, but then to identify that there's a problem.
To identify that there's a problem. Yeah. And again, it starts with anger. I said, this is just crazy. So I think I wrote a column about it.
An opinion?
An opinion piece, in the paper. And then I think I was talking about it on radio at the time, and that anger just started to build. So I contacted his family and just got to know them. We're still friends. We still see each other from time to time. And I went to see Jack in jail and sat across from him, because I think you've got to, when you're telling those kind of stories, you've got to be in the room with the person. You've got to sort of look them in the eye and, get that understanding. Well, I just walked out of there even more pissed off of the jail. And so, I just started writing stories and columns. I contacted the victims of that crash. The victims couldn't believe he was in jail. They wanted him out, and he got an appeal and was released after 1 year, which was great, which is what should have happened.
And so what was your role in that?
Well, I don't know. I guess it's just public opinion, and just telling that story over and over again, and just trying to outline where it went wrong. Where he was let down, where the system had let him down, where the judge got it wrong. And the Court of Appeal said yes, the judge got it wrong. There's 3 judges up. I'll never forget the judge in the middle, because the Court of Appeal had the 3. Was in the middle, and they said, the Montague Street Bridge got hit, and he said, gets hit all the time. I thought, yes. I was sitting right next to Jack's wife, Wendy. I said, fucking yes, he's going to, and then the case went on a little bit more, and then he just, the judge looked at Jack and said, you can come out of the dock, Jack, come out. And those just, everyone's in, we just burst into tears, and and Wendy, Jack's wife, stood up and was hugging him, and they're just standing there, and the court broke out in applause, and the judges didn't touch it; they just let it sit. They let the applause sort of ring.
So there was,
and I'm.
So there's a feeling that justice has been served.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and and then Jack got out that day, and I think it was a couple of days later he sent me a text or rang me. I think he might have even rang me. Said, I'm at the beach.
Sand between my toes.
I'm at the beach, and it was just, it was good. It was really good.
You stay in touch?
Yeah. He sent me a text. Actually, it might have been a Christmas. Sends me a text, and then if my wife and I go to Ballarat, we were in Ballarat last year. We'll drop in there and have some tea and chat, and they're good people. But see, good people. This is the other thing: is that good people without an avenue, to sort of scream, and so to be a part of that, to help with that, to help tell that story and help them scream. There's plenty of people out there who have lots of connections, lots of money, and I hate the thought that people need money or connections to be able to get their story told properly. So just start with anger, move into curiosity, listen a lot, and then
keep people at the centre.
And then keep going, I think is probably one of the other things. I remember there was somebody in newspapers, he was having fun with me, and that's okay, But he just said, have you got that bus driver out yet? And sort of rolled his eyes. And I felt like saying, no, I fucking haven't, but we're going to keep going. So I think sometimes, I'll probably do a couple more stories than is needed sometimes. It'll probably go a little bit longer. But it's almost like, well, yeah, we haven't resulted yet. It's not done yet,
But it sounds like it's personal a little bit as well.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't sort of it is. And I can't understand why it isn't for other people sometimes when I hear bad storytelling. I go, you have got gold here as a story. And something that really needs to be fixed, but they're just sort of telling the story, get it done, take a break, come back, tell another story about something else or whatever. I don't know. I've never been able to get my head around that.
Do you think that that's a lack of experience, lack of technical capability, skills, curiosity? Like, what do you think is behind that?
Oh, some people don't give a shit,
right?
To be honest, and some people just, I don't know, they're just. I guess this is select few. This is not all, but I think some of them are just, I don't know. Just this is what I do. I do these things. I talk on the radio. I talk on the TV. I write in the paper. I just, I've done the story. Whatever. I don't know. I think it's personal business, to be honest, but which can drive you crazy. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it. I wouldn't recommend it as a lifestyle, but. I just couldn't imagine doing any other way, to be honest.
So Jeffrey Joffa Korf is a name that will be familiar to lots of people in Melbourne in particular.
Yep.
Known to AFL fans as the Collingwood fan in the gold jacket who used to sit behind the goals a lot of the games.
Head of the cheer squad.
Head of the cheer squad. He pleaded guilty in September 2022 to sexually abusing Melbourne man Alex Case when Case was 14 years old. Now, the case itself kind of played out, right? But there was an issue in it for you about character references.
Yeah, it's that happened. I think the biggest thing where the anger began is he walked. In fact, I wrote a column. The first column I wrote on that is he walked. He walked. He's sexually abused a 14-year-old. He's guilty, and he walks. And I thought, hang on a sec. When did pedophilia become the kind of thing that we don't lock up anymore? So I wrote a column about that. And a friend of mine contacted me and he said, oh, I saw your column. Yeah, that's great. And he goes, but what I want to know, curiosity from a friend of mine, said, what I want to know is who's writing character references for this prick to help him out? Because there was, they were saying, oh, he got character references. The judge said, oh, you're a good guy generally and whatever. I thought, gee, that's a good question. Who's writing these bloody character references? So I get the court transcripts and the sentencing remarks, and I sit down and there's the name of a person from a charity. I can't remember the exact charity now, so I won't say it, but it doesn't matter anyway. But it's a person's name who was a former head of this charity, said Joffa's a cracking guy and, lovely bloke and, salt of the earth and, blah, blah, blah. And Father Bob Maguire, who's passed now, but many people will know Father Bob, a rousing bloody character reference for him. So who's writing references for pedophiles? So it took me, and again, I'm not bragging because it's a big part of the story. It took me about 30 seconds to find that charity owner's number and ring him. Right, so I was talking to him 30 seconds after I saw his name, and I said, "Oh, g'day, mate. How you going? Yeah, good. And I said, look, I'm a journalist and I'm just following this story, Joff Corf. And, oh, yeah. He sort of went, oh, yeah, Joff Corf, yeah. He just sort of mumbled and I could tell he wasn't whatever. And I said, look, this character reference you wrote, and he said, what? And I said, you're in the court transcript. You wrote him a character reference. And just silence and shock.
Wow.
And anyway, the upshot is, yes, he did write a character reference, but he doesn't even know how long ago it was. He's guessing that it's like, I don't know, it was 10 years, maybe even longer, when Joffa Corf, I should say, was considered a good guy by many and fooled many people. So what happened is Corf's team just cut and paste this old reference and put it forward as a current reference. No date on it, no reference to the case or anything. Put it forward. Outrage, just complete outrage and anger. So I rang Bob Maguire. Bob was quite old at the time and his mind wasn't quite what we'd like our mind to be at that time. And Bob had no recollection of that reference. He doesn't remember writing it. He doesn't remember having any part of it. There was a bit of a question mark over who actually wrote it. And he may have signed it, but he was also part of a foundation where he was signing lots of things. So it was just it could have just come anywhere, He was not, it'd be fair to say he wasn't in sound mind. Anyway, so I wrote a story. Herald Sun put it on the front page about these dodgy references, and the upshot is I contact the prosecution, I contact the lawyer. That was a great call, calling
the
Corf's
defence
lawyer.
lawyer.
Yeah. Just like, come on, mate. Where did these things come from? Oh, look, just don't. I could talk about that guy for hours. But prosecution said it's not. Get this, it's not our job to check references.
Oh, good.
Right?
Yeah, that's what you want.
And I said to them, again, it's personal business. I said, it took me 30 seconds to find this guy to check to see if the reference was real and it's not. How is that not your job to do that? But the judge, so we've got the defence team, we've got the prosecution, then we've got the judge who has accepted a reference without a date on it. That's kind of generic looking.
Non-committal.
Exactly. It doesn't make any references to the crime or whatever. To say something, look, we know Joffa did this, but he has been trying to, that kind of thing you could imagine. Then the county court put that. So I say to the county court, tell me the process of the judge accepting that. Can you talk me through the process of how that works? It gets given to them, he looks at it, what's the process? Not telling you anything. Wouldn't tell me what the process was. No comment all the way through from the county court. So we just followed this through and pushed and pushed and pushed. Anyway, the upshot is all the courts now, because of those stories, all the courts, Magistrate, Supreme, Court of Appeal, and particularly the county court, which really screwed up here, big time. They now all the documents must be dated and must make reference to where the case is at the moment. So we're aware that Joffa has pleaded guilty. We're aware of what the crime is. So that must be part of the character reference now to go ahead.
So that's a legislative change that has
that's
been
a
achieved.
change in what they call the practice notes
right.
in the court, which is a big deal inside the courts. It's not particularly, I think it should be law. In fact, that's one of the key problems in this area is that if a victim makes a statutory declaration, so if a victim makes a victim impact statement, that's carries the same weight as a statutory declaration. Character references do not, right? So
and therefore don't have the same burden of proof is the wrong word, but ratification.
No, absolutely. So if you bullshit in a character reference, there's no repercussion for you.
Right.
So that's something I'd still like to try and change. So that, however, there's some big changes around character references at the moment. They're thinking of ditching them,
Right.
which would be great, to be honest.
But what's the flow-on impact of this change? Like, presumably this has the potential to impact thousands of future victims, people who maybe aren't even victims yet.
Yeah, that's right. This will affect every person that goes into court, and they use character references. So it'll be a lot harder. You can imagine, you can't just grab the old character reference now. It's got to state, So it's a big change. I'm particularly proud of that, because it's not something that's going to make a lot of news, because it should have been happening anyway.
Yeah.
There's a real shock to say, what, is that not the case that you've got to put a goddamn date on it? But I think, we were let down by one of our key institutions. I mean, the county court is, they handle a fair whack of the serious cases, obviously. It's what they do is very important, and they dropped the ball on that so big, but they were so slow to fix it, and they would not answer to how it was being fixed. And even when they did fix it, I tried to speak to them and say, look, can you just explain to us how? No comment. No comment. And since then, there's a problem with the character references. They've seemed to have been driven underground, where once I was able to find out the name of who supplied a character reference, a lot of that has now been kept secret. I'm working on a story at the moment, and I contacted the court, and they said, we're not telling you.
Right.
That. So it's
So the way to fix the procedural problem is to just redact it.
Redact it. Secrecy,
Yeah. Which is obviously, it's one of our significant public institutions essentially letting us down.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Damn right. So, shining a bit of a light on that, to use an old journalism cliche, but to shine some light on that and to take them to task for that is particularly satisfying, because this is something they survive on secrecy. A lot of these institutions survive, maybe not necessarily secrecy, they survive on people not asking them a question.
Lack of curiosity.
Just lack of curiosity, absolutely. Yeah. Lack of anger as well, and a lack of curiosity.
Yeah.
I've seen these people go through these. We had another case where a guy in his 90s, a World War II veteran, was stabbed in his home in Ballarat, really just a beautiful family, just lovely family, and the guy got bugger all. There's two guys, they got bugger all, and it just died down as a story. It just wasn't a story, like the death was a story and the court case was a story, but it was just a story. I thought, God, if this was a mum, in Baldwin getting stabbed to death in her own home, would be in the streets marching, but it's just this old guy from Ballarat, and it just pissed me off beyond belief that it wasn't a story. So I talked with the family a lot, and anyway, the guy went back to court and got another 3 years. So, just a little win, get him a few more years, in there. But that kind of storytelling is important. So I feel angry now, just sort of talking about these things. It's just good people getting screwed over.
Is there something you're working on right now that you can, without getting us in legal trouble or, anything like that you can give us an insight?
Yeah, and I mean, we had a story in the paper on Monday, and I'm doing some follow-up work on it now. The Victims of Crime Commissioner, which has been in place for about 10 years, is going to be absorbed into the Department of Justice. Well, that's bullshit, because most of the time they're investigating the Department of Justice. The complaints from victims to the Commissioner are about the Department of Justice, and now for sort of save a few pennies, they're going to absorb it in there. So, I got the two former commissioners and the current commissioner, all on the record, are concerned about what's happening. Again, starts with a bit of anger, and then curiosity, talking to the people involved that know what they're talking about, and then trying to put the story together. So there's a lot of, Tom, and you're very good at this, is there's a lot of listening involved. It's calling somebody up and listening, and trying not to be set on what the story is. So you start with the nucleus of it, like the campfire thing again, is you don't get stuck on what the story
Don't
is
prejudge
too
it.
much. Yeah,
Let
don't
it play
prejudge
out.
it. Yeah, don't. Yeah, because if it changes, you'll either get because it could be far stronger, or it might be weaker, and you've just got to give it up. You know that can happen. Yeah.
As journalists and storytellers, we often get a front row seat to sort of report society to itself, right? And sometimes we learn things that we can't talk about, and sometimes that we pursue something that we know to be true, you know, but we can't necessarily find the verifiable evidence to be able to publish, you know, and to bring this whole story to light. You know, again, without getting us in any kind of legal trouble. Is there one that got away?
Yeah, there's one that springs to mind that it involves a rape, a suspected rape, and we were talking to people involved at the time, and it involves somebody that is known, and we just couldn't get it, you know, couldn't sort of move it into, at the behest of the victims, by the way, the alleged victims, you know. But it always sort of sits with me, where I think there wasn't nothing there. You know, there was something. There was something there, something pretty awful, but it just couldn't quite come around.
I guess there's always a chance that it will at some point. The curiosity stays and the outrage remains.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because I've got the old numbers, you know, and it was quite a while ago, but I've got the old numbers, and you almost just want to start dialing and say, hey, listen, I'm still here if you want to talk about it, you know. And you've sort of got to walk that line of, is that, you know, they know how to find me. We just leave it, you know, or, you know, it's not pushing them. It's just, again, you know, I don't do that to victims. I don't push victims, because I mean, and from a professional point of view, it works against you. You know, you're better off stepping back, because it's better for everybody. But I'm actually, I rang another journalist friend of mine, who's a woman, because I wanted to sort of get that perspective, and I just said, do I call, not to call? She said, oh, that's a tough one. So I'm actually, this very moment, I'm sort of wrestling with it still. Yeah. Yeah.
So we started by talking about this campaign journalism, or what do we call it? Campaign storytelling as well. Why does this type of storytelling matter?
Oh, yeah. Because it just won't come out. I mean, things just won't, they won't come out. And just doing a story, there are a lot of people, I dare say courts and politicians, if they've got any brains, they know that there's always going to be a story about them. I remember saying this, I won't say the name of the person, but I remember observing that the smart ones, it was a former police commissioner, I said the smart ones know that at some point in their career someone's going to call for their resignation, right? It's just going to happen. So don't get shocked by it. Just say you're not going anywhere, write it out, come out the other side. The answer to the question is, when it's just a straight story, they write it out. But when it's campaigning, you're giving them something new and saying, no, hang on, we haven't fixed it yet. It's still a problem. It's still a thing. What are we doing about it? What are we doing about it? You know, getting people angry about it. Now, I think, and I would have said this to you back when you were, when we first met that day and you were severely underdressed, and I could imagine what it was, daggy shorts.
It was a grey hoodie.
A grey,
yeah.
Oh, cold. I would have said to you then, for me, there's two types of stories. There's stories that people care about, which is, say today, the day that we're recording this, would be the former Prince Andrew. All right, so everyone knows about it, cares about it, whatever. Then there's the story you want them to care about. All right, so they don't even know about it yet, or they don't know why they need to care about it. So with Jack Aston, you've got to say, oh, we let a pedophile out, we locked this guy up. Oh, okay, well, that doesn't sound very good. We locked him up for a long time and he's still there and his family's suffering and the passengers want him out. So you're adding to that story. So you're getting the people behind you to say, oh, okay, yeah, that's crappy, So I think the difference with that campaign is you keep building until you try and get that outcome.
I feel like we should play out with "Can You Hear the People Sing?" From,
That's right.
from Les Mis.
Yeah.
Justin, thank you so much for taking us behind the story.
Oh, thanks very much, Tom. Pleasure, mate. Anything for you.
If this story made you think, please share it with someone who should hear it. You can follow The Story Behind the Story wherever you listen to podcasts and find out more on our socials. I'm Tom Andronis. Thanks for tuning in.